Welcome, dear listeners, to tonight's tale of terror and suspense. Our story unfolds in a world where the lines between reality and madness blur, where the darkness of the human mind is laid bare for all to see, and bear witness to the harrowing journey of a woman named Jessica. Join me as we step through the doors of the Twilight Clinic.
Jessica had always been the epitome of success and happiness. Young, driven, and intelligent, she had a promising career, a loving circle of friends, and a vibrant social life. She was admired and envied by those around her, a shining star in a world that was often dim. But fate had other plans for her, and one fateful morning, she would find herself ripped from her perfect life and plunged into a nightmare from which there was no escape. It happened without warning. Jessica awoke with a start in a sterile, white room. The first thing she noticed was the cold, hard floor beneath her. Her body ached from the unfamiliar surface, and she could feel the chill of the floor seeping into her bones. Confusion and panic washed over her as she realized she was no longer in her apartment, but in a psychiatric clinic for the severely mentally ill. Her heart pounded in her chest as she scanned the room, desperately trying to make sense of her surroundings. The walls were bare, save for a small window that offered a glimpse of a dreary courtyard outside. A single, dim fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting an eerie glow on the room. The smell of antiseptic and the sterile environment made her feel even more trapped and disoriented. As Jessica tried to piece together what had happened, the door to her room creaked open, and a team of nurses entered. They eyed her cautiously, as if expecting her to lash out at any moment. When she demanded to know where she was and why she was there, their expressions shifted from wariness to pity. Jessica's frustration and confusion boiled over as she tried to make them understand that she didn't belong there. She ranted about her life, her career, her friends, anything to prove that she was not insane. But the more she spoke, the more the nurses exchanged concerned glances, their skepticism growing. In a desperate attempt to prove her sanity, Jessica lunged towards the nurses, screaming and pleading for them to listen. But her actions only served to reinforce their belief that she was a danger to herself and others. The nurses quickly restrained her, their practiced hands holding her down as they injected a sedative into her arm. "They can't do this to me. I'm not crazy." As the sedative took effect, her world faded into darkness, leaving her more terrified and alone than ever before. The nightmare had only just begun, and Jessica would find herself fighting not only for her sanity but for her very soul within the twisted confines of the Twilight Clinic. As the days turned to weeks, Jessica fought to maintain her sanity in this strange and frightening world. She was surrounded by people who were broken, their minds ravaged by disorders and traumas she could scarcely imagine. The doctors and nurses treated her with a mix of pity and skepticism, dismissing her claims of a life beyond the clinic's walls as nothing more than the delusions of a troubled mind.
A very dangerous woman.
I know my life was real. With each passing day, Jessica grew more determined to reclaim her stolen life. She tried to befriend some of the other patients, hoping that together they could unravel the mysteries of the clinic and find a way to escape. But most of them were too lost in their own suffering to be of any help, and the few who listened to her story were either too frightened or too broken to offer any assistance. I can't rely on anyone else. Desperate for answers, Jessica began to question her own memories, her own reality. She replayed the events of her former life in her mind, searching for clues, for some explanation for her sudden and inexplicable imprisonment. But the more she thought about it, the more her world began to unravel. Memories blurred, faces became unrecognizable, and the life she had known began to feel like nothing more than a fever dream. As Jessica's grip on reality continued to slip, she started to wonder if perhaps she truly was insane. Maybe her life before the clinic had never existed, and she was nothing more than a figment of her own imagination, a lost soul adrift in a sea of madness.
And so, dear listeners, we leave Jessica at the edge of the abyss, her fate hanging in the balance. But fear not, for her harrowing journey is far from over. Join us again for part 2 of the Twilight Clinic. Until then, may your dreams be free of nightmares. And may you always find a beacon of light in the darkness. Good night, and sweet dreams.